Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of NICTITATING Presents, an interview series with various speculative fiction authors. My guest today is Jo Kaplan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you in advance for putting up with my very rusty interview skills. So you have a new book coming out. When is the release date?
The release date is September 8th,
Okay, so a couple of months.
so we got a bit of time.
Yeah, and the title of that is It Will Just Be Us.
Yes,
Who's putting that out?
that's coming out through Crooked Lane Books. They typically do mystery and thrillers, but it seems like they've got some more horror titles coming out.
That's cool. I mean, that's always a good thing. I was about to ask, how did you start writing? That's a pretty vague one.
That's not a bad question,
It's
though.
okay. Well, what drew you to writing horror or, darker fiction?
Uh, my interest in writing has always been in that genre. So so that kind of does go hand in hand anyway with how did you start writing for me. When I was a kid, I was really into, the Goosebumps books. I don't know if you were a big fan of those.
Oh, yeah, no, I was a huge fan.
Yeah, I figured. So that was a huge deal. When I was a kid, I read those all the time. And actually, when I was really young, I mean, I don't know, six or seven, I used to make my own Goosebumps books.
Okay.
So I would come up with a title, some goofy title, they always had those. I would draw a cover, and then I would just staple a bunch of pages of paper together. And instead of actually writing a story, though, I would just scribble inside the paper, and then I would pretend to read my book to people.
Okay.
But I would just make it up as I went along.
I mean, that's a good skill to have. Marketing is important.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably when I realized that I love telling stories, and I love specifically telling horror stories. And then, of course, I actually started, writing things down and not just making them up.
I mean, it's important.
But I've really always been interested, in that genre.
Yeah, a lot of the people I talk to, it's like they say I basically started since I was a kid.
Seems like a lifelong thing, you get introduced early and it sticks.
Yeah, I think you get them early. So, your new book is going to be a novel.
Yes.
And the book before that, Dark Carnival, was that also a novel?
Yeah, that was a novel as well. That came out last summer from Independent Legions. Definitely a straightforward kind of horror novel involving a creepy carnival.
Okay, yeah. Always nice. So between the two novels, between Dark Carnival and It Will Just Be Us, did you notice yourself trying anything you hadn't before?
Yeah, I would say It Will Just Be Us is definitely more of a gothic story. I also wrote it in, actually, something really different that I did that I hadn't done before was that I wrote it in first person present tense, which isn't something I had ever considered doing, but Dark Carnival was in kind of a standard third person perspective. But It Will Just Be Us plays around a little bit with time. The house is sort of haunted by echoes of the past, haunted by memories that kind of replay themselves over and over. So the characters are, the way they experience time is a little funny because they see these sort of ghostly echoes of the past. So to kind of get into the way that the main character relates to time and the sort of eternal present of the past, I felt like writing her perspective in first person present tense kind of brought that in. So that's kind of a really particular thing that was new. But it also gave me an opportunity to really dig into her voice. She's kind of like a meditative voice, very thoughtful and descriptive, I guess.
Yeah, I guess because first person present, you can kind of more seamlessly hop into the thoughts of the character, as opposed to the third. It's kind of like through dialogue, or maybe you had thoughts, but
right. That's a good point. Yeah, it kind of moves in and out between thought and narration a little more smoothly.
Yeah, so good to hear. And you've written short stories before. I know you had a story in an issue of Vastarian. That's actually how I first read you.
Yeah, I always, I always wanted to write novels. That was actually my first desire as a writer, which is funny because I feel then it goes the other way, where people start with short stories and then they move to novels. And I was always wanting to be a novelist. And then I kind of went back and really started to dig into short stories, which it's such a different sort of form, than the novel. And I felt like I didn't know how to do it for a while. And then I started reading more short fiction and writing more and realizing there's so much possibility with, they're experimental. You can do different things, play around with different things, I think in a way that is harder to do with a novel. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, the novel is such a time commitment.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so you can kind of come up with an idea, bang it out, get the short story done. Yeah, you don't have to commit as much to it. But I've had fun writing short stories, and I submitted for a while before I got into publications like Visterion, which is such a great journal. It's a really cool mix of fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, no, I had a story in there too. I was shocked. I mean, it's always a pleasant surprise when you sell stuff. I think what started as kind of a Ligotti tribute journal has quickly morphed into just an all-purpose literary horror journal.
Yeah, they have some really cool work in there
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
with a very weird angle. I really like how the kind of weird fiction element that they bring in.
So I guess moving organically from that, some people in, dark fiction consider themselves horror writers. Some people consider themselves weird writers. What would you consider yourself?
That's such a tough question because it's something I've thought about too, how we end up with these labels or how we label ourselves. I sort of started out thinking of myself as a horror writer, as, the kid who used to make Goosebumps books. Of course, I'm a horror writer. And then I started thinking about like the different sort of genres around that. And I was like, maybe dark fiction writer, speculative fiction writer. I feel like there are so many ways you could go in terms of labeling yourself. I feel like I came back around to horror because that just seems to fit most with what I do.
Yeah.
I like digging into a little bit of weirdness, but know that I would call myself just a straight up weird fiction writer. So I think I put on my website horror and suspense, and I feel like that pretty much covers my bases.
Yeah, that's a pretty good all-purpose. Yeah, it's tough because you don't really get to I mean, you have to decide at some point if you're doing a bio, but you don't always get to decide. Like sometimes your audience decides for you.
Yeah, and those labels can be kind of weird. Like that just made me think of how I saw those Amazon rankings that, number 1000 whatever in this random category. My agent had noticed that It Will Just Be Us was like number 1000 something in vampire horror, which I thought was really odd because it's not a vampire book.
No, I read a little of the first chapter. I didn't see that. It is odd how they kind of categorize. I have a novella that it's like whatever number under 90-minute thrillers, and I was like, okay, I mean, I'll take it, I guess, but I considered it very much like a supernatural horror novella. But I guess there's a prison and it's a thriller. Okay.
Yeah, thriller is an odd one because I feel like I always associate thriller with the sort of non-supernatural end, but then there's supernatural thriller. It's like who there's a lot of ambiguity, I think, in that kind of labeling.
There is. So let me see here. So where are you originally from?
I'm from Chicago, and I moved out to Los Angeles about 8 years ago.
All right. And you obviously must enjoy LA enough because you're still there.
Still here, yeah. Yeah, it's a tough city because it's expensive and it's crowded and there's a lot of competition everywhere, but my husband and I kind of landed where we want to be, I guess, in terms of our careers. So yeah, we're sticking around here.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I just moved to, a year ago. Yeah, I guess that's just Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm enjoying it. It's very different. I grew up around Boston, so.
Yeah, really different climate.
It's a bit more, yeah, I mean, well, for one, it's a desert, yeah. It's a high desert, but it's still desert. Do you think living in LA has influenced your writing at all? I know that's a weird question. Sometimes people think it does. Sometimes people don't think it matters at all?
I don't think that's a weird question at all. Setting is really important in my stories. I just find myself really drawn to characterizing the setting. For instance, and It Will Just Be Us, early reviewers already said, like, the house itself is a character because I put so much time and effort into the setting itself. So I do think that where I am can affect what I'm writing. And I feel like I've had more interest lately in writing actually these kinds of desert settings, like you mentioned. Parts of LA are kind of a desert. It's pretty much a desert. It's there's a lot here though. There's the coast, there's mountains, but there is a lot of desert nearby as well. So the book that I'm working on right now is definitely taking place in that desert setting and kind of trying to bring the Gothic feeling into the sort of hot, dry desert setting that is not often associated with the Gothic. So I feel like that's something I've been kind of exploring.
That's cool. I mean, I've been writing about the desert more just kind of naturally. I also found writing about New England a lot. It's like so saturated in terms of just horror stories set in New England.
Yeah.
That in a way, writing about, say Detroit, which I wrote in one story, or, just the desert of Arizona or New Mexico, it sort of, I hesitate to say gives you an edge, but it does differentiate the story a little bit in terms of just the whole ambiance.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, because the entire history of American horror seems to come out of New England anyway, between Lovecraft, Poe, Stephen King, whoever. They all seem to be situated in that area.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's definitely true. Sorry, there will be pauses because I make all this up on the spot. So, so you said you're already working on what would be your third novel, correct?
Technically my fourth novel, but I don't really speak of my first novel.
Let's just say in terms of published.
My first novel was a long time ago. It's one of those that's best for
a lot of people don't mention the first one. You gotta write the one. And you stated it's in without giving too much away, can you give a kind of hint of what the novel's about?
Yeah. So I actually just finished writing the first draft, so I'm hoping that I'll have a little bit more revision and I'll start sending that out. But okay. Trying to figure out how to describe it. In the near future, in a sort of post-climate apocalypse, the majority of the western U.S. has become just straight desert, kind of uninhabitable. And these two women are kind of scrounging and looting and scavenging their way across the desert, essentially in search of water. And they come across this old ghost town in Nevada, a mining town. And they go into the mine to try to find some water, something to drink, because they're basically getting completely dehydrated. And one of them ends up finding this old diary. And so that's sort of a frame story for the real story, which is this woman's diary from the 1800s. And she's telling this story of some very strange occurrences that happened in this town, specifically something strange that comes out of the mine and basically murders people. So, yeah. So there's a lot of historical details that I need to do some more research on to try to get it to feel a little more authentic for the time period.
All right. I like that. I liked the beginning part, and then I figured out it was a framing thing. But that's cool. But that's interesting. So it seems like even though you are sort of sticking to a particular genre, you're trying out, different settings and different types of stories. I mean, especially the settings. It seems like the settings are coming up a lot, like a carnival, haunted house, and, post-apocalyptic kind of deserted town.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like settings are so important, especially in horror, where the setting can do so much just to create the atmosphere of dread. So, yeah, I feel like I really rely on picking my settings carefully. But another newish thing with this one is that historical element, and, that sort of historical Western horror, I guess. Slightly new angle for me, at least.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky, but I'm confident that you will nail it, or have already. All right, so we're nearing about the 20-minute mark. This will be the weirder part of the interview. I have done an interview series before known as Random Ass Interviews. Normally they're text-based because I'll, think of something, write it out, and then send it to people. So I'm going to ask you a couple random questions. They don't really have anything to do with anything. I just like doing it.
All right.
Okay. If your favorite food wore a hat, what kind of hat would it wear?
Ooh, my favorite food? That's pretty broad.
Well, okay, favorite dessert then.
Favorite dessert. Okay, that narrows it down a little bit. I'm gonna say some sort of like beanie, like a snow cap, which is very funny to me because I've been living in LA so long that I've forgotten what winter clothes are. But I'm thinking of cookies and cream ice cream. For some reason, it kind of looks like dirty snow.
Okay, and a little winter hat.
Maybe I'm rationalizing this answer too much.
No, that fits. That fits. I mean, the whole point is just it doesn't really matter what your answer is. Let me see here. What's your favorite dinosaur?
I'm gonna go with,
if you have a favorite,
a Triceratops, because that's the first one I can think of.
All right, nice. If you owned a 3D printer, what would be the first thing you would 3D print?
Oh man, that's a good question.
I don't even know what I would do, so.
Wow, I've never thought about that before. It'd be great to be able to 3D print. Okay, this is completely unrealistic, but since we were talking about food, it would be great to be able to just like 3D print some food. Not have to go grocery shopping, not have to cook anything. Just like, one of those sci-fi stories on a spaceship where you could just like print yourself a meal. Done.
Yeah, that would be pretty great. Okay. Yeah, that was a good answer. I'd say we should wrap it up because I'm running out of weird things to ask.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I apologize. It started raining really heavy, which is really odd because I'm in the desert.
Oh, man.
Yeah, getting close to the monsoon season out here, so it's like the one time of the year we actually get rain.
Oh, it'd be nice to have some rain. It's been hot here. Yeah, ours is usually like January, February. We're heading into the hot, dry season, so we'll probably start to get fires soon. Yay.
Yeah, fun stuff. Well, anyway, again, thank you for coming on. And your book is out in September. It's called It Will Just Be Us. It's from Crooked Lane Publishing.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I got all that right. And I'll do my little plug here. I am the owner and operator of NICTITATING Books. My name is Sean M. Thompson. I just released a full-length short story collection entitled Screaming Creatures through NICTITATING Books, through the press. So if you're so inclined, check it out. And I'm going to be making a Twitter for NICTITATING Books, and there's already a Facebook page, and so stay tuned. We're going to be doing a book from Paula Ashe, one from Maxwell Bauman, and probably some other stuff. So that'll be exciting. Anyway, third time. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Thanks
for listening to NICTITATING Presents, and stay tuned because we're going to have a lot more interviews in store.